Hey everyone, welcome to a very special Lines Super Bowl prop betting show. I am your host, Nicole Russo, alongside managing editor of thelines.com, Stephen Andress, and we are excited to be filming this show on Radio Row in Phoenix for the Super Bowl. Stephen, how are you feeling about being here?
It's kind of weird that we're in the same room doing a show for the first time. I mean, we're usually in a virtual studio.
It's weird looking at you. Yeah, exactly.
Like first time post-pandemic, we've been on an actual set here for the show, but I'm really excited. It's not only the Super Bowl, it's the first Super Bowl in a state where it's actually legal to bet on it.
Yeah.
After all these years of what we do being taboo, and we have an amazing Caesars Sportsbook prop catalog to choose from.
Yes.
Our entire staff. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a fun show, and thank you to Caesars Sportsbook for hosting us and for the Omaha Network for hosting us as well. As you can see, we are on their set today, and we're going to be taking a look, like Stephen said, at that Caesars prop betting catalog, which is one of the biggest prop betting catalogs released each year in time for the big game, and we're going to take a look at all those markets, and honestly, some of them we see only come around once a year for the Super Bowl. Now, the line staff is going to be joining us virtually to go over what bets they like and what bets they're making for this big matchup between the Chiefs and the Eagles on Sunday, and we have some special guests joining us as well at the end, so stay tuned. Stephen, any last-minute words for the intro before we get into these prop betting markets?
Listen, if you're a novice bettor, Nicole, the prop catalog for the Super Bowl could be really overwhelming, right? There's a million things in there, it seems like. And
I think there's actually thousands. I was going to say, Caesars releases, I believe, thousands and thousands of prop catalogs. So you're right, it can be overwhelming.
Right. Well, we've done the work for everybody, right? We've gone through every aspect of this catalog. We have looked at quarterbacks and running backs and touchdown props and everything you can think of. This show will help you navigate that, what we think is the best value in each of those categories to help you make smarter bets here for the Super Bowl.
All right, let's jump into it. And we're going to kick things off with one of the most popular prop bets that Caesars releases every year. It's one of the fun ones and one of the ones that you can actually only bet during the Super Bowl, and that is going to be the coin toss. Now, obviously, every NFL regular season game has a coin toss, but you can't bet it in the regular season. So it's why it's one of the most popular ones, and people really seem to love the sweat of a good old-fashioned 50-50 prop. So here to talk to us about how he's handicapping or maybe not handicapping the coin toss is Giovanni Shorter. So Gio, go ahead and take it away.
So you want to bet on the coin toss? Well, you shouldn't bet on the coin toss because it's a coin toss. But if you insist on betting on the coin toss, I got some facts, some interesting tidbits that might sway you in a certain direction. First thing to note is that the Chiefs and Eagles are both teams who love to defer. So if you're going to bet on, let's say, opening score, opening drive, things of that nature, you might want to look that both teams are going to give the ball to whoever the other team is. So the Chiefs have won the coin toss 8 times this season. They deferred 7 times. The Eagles have won the coin toss 13 times this season, and they deferred all 13 times. Another interesting tidbit is that the winner of the Super Bowl coin toss, they've actually lost the last 8 Super Bowls. That's just interesting. In the last 9 Super Bowls, heads has won 6 times. So, again, means nothing because it's a coin, but heads is certainly on a roll recently. The coin tosses rarely plays the laws of averages. Heads and tails have been on streaks of 3 or more over 9 times. So that goes back to the previous fact that says, it really doesn't matter that heads has won more recently because it's a coin toss. Those things just happen. Interesting enough, though, Arizona has held the Super Bowl 3 times, and in all 3 of those years, heads has won the coin toss. So if you're going to bet, heads looks like the bet, but again, I'm reiterating, it's a coin toss. It's a toss-up, literal toss-up.
All right, Stephen, have you ever bet the coin toss before? And if you have, how have you gone about handicapping it? How much time do you actually put into this market?
Admittedly, I have bet the coin toss, but not just heads or tails. I can't say I've ever gone that far down the gambling rabbit hole. But in years past, there have been situations, Nicole, where one team will defer if they win the toss a lot more often than the other team. Now, in this era of the NFL, teams are going to defer pretty much every single time. These two teams, the Chiefs and the Eagles, as Gio said, have deferred every single time except for one. So there's really not any type of advantage of who's going to be more likely to get the ball first to try and hit some first touchdown score props in there. So more just for fun in this case. I'm not a huge fan of betting the coin toss because there's nothing worse than starting off your list of bets
before
with
the
losing
game
before the
even
damn kickoff.
Exactly, before the game even starts. And I mean, if you want to look at the history, you absolutely can. I think we're sitting at 52% tails over history and 48% heads, and we have a whole page dedicated to that over at thelines.com. So if you really want to spend hours handicapping it, by all means, but like you said, you and Gio are kind of taking a look at that market of if they're going to defer, which team's going to win, and if they win, are they going to defer? But we've kind of exhausted all we can on the coin toss, and now we are going to send it over to Eli Hershkovich to talk about who he likes when it comes to touchdown props.
Now looking at some touchdown props for the big game, which is featuring two of the best tight ends in the NFL. Travis Kelce has over 200 receiving yards over expected this season, right at 202, and he ranks number 2 at his position in that category. Dallas Goedert for the Eagles ranks number 3 right behind Kelce with 189 receiving yards over expected. Now at Caesars Sportsbook, Kelce has the shortest odds to find the end zone at around -115, -114 to be exact, of this recording. So if you're betting $114, you would win $100 if Kelce scores. But I'm looking at Dallas Goedert to find pay dirt at +175, which means if you bet $100 on Goedert to score, you win $175 because it's plus money. Now, the Chiefs rank number 19 in DVOA per Football Outsiders this season versus opposing tight ends. But Goedert's target depth has been low as well. So that might make you think, okay, do I want to back Goedert to do anything in this game? Or do I want to take the under on his receiving yards? But if you look at the way the red zone targets shape up for the Eagles, Goedert ranks right behind A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith in red zone targets this season, which is to be expected. And I already mentioned how Kansas City struggles matching up against tight ends, so I think attention will be paid less to Goedert, which means I think that price at +175 is valuable. So give me Dallas Goedert to score a touchdown at +175 over at Caesars Sportsbook. And if you're looking at some more of his player props, I would consider over receptions on Goedert rather than over receiving yards just because of that target depth that I mentioned.
Thanks, Eli, for that. Now we have Trey Wingo joining us, the Chief Trends Officer still, like we said, at Caesars Sportsbook. Trey, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us again. I think this is like the third or fourth time we've gotten to sit down and chat.
Well, it's good to talk to you again, so let's get into it. What do you want to know?
All right. Is there a matchup in this game that really stands out to you, or something that you really feel like is a mismatch that could determine the outcome of the game?
Absolutely, and it has nothing to do with any of the players that you would think. It's Chris Jones against the offensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles have 4 or 5 guys that can absolutely wreck a game plan. They got 4 dudes. The Chiefs have a lot of complementary players and Chris Jones. Chris Jones has to be what I like to call a war daddy, which is he's got to be the guy that ruins things. He did that against the Bengals. Had 2 sacks in that game, his first 2 postseason sacks, which is really odd. In Super Bowl 54, I think he tipped 3 or 4 passes at the line and really shifted the balance of that game. Chris Jones is going to have to find ways to win on the interior against Jason Kelce, and then when they bounce him to the outside, either against Jordan Mailata or against Lane Johnson. Now, Lane's a little banged up, but he held his own against Nick Bosa. So Chris Jones has to be the best player on the defensive field for Kansas City.
And do you have a pick on who you think is going to win the Super Bowl based on what you just said?
I do. I picked Kansas City before the season started.
All right.
So I would be really stupid to jump off now when I'm 1 game away from looking really smart. But the Eagles, I think, are a better team.
Okay.
I think top to bottom, they're 1 through 53, or how many people are going to have active on Super Bowl Sunday, is probably better than the active players on Kansas City. However, as a former as a current San Francisco executive, and I won't say his name because this was an off-the-record conversation, told me before Super Bowl 54, he said, Trey, we're the better team. Top to bottom, we're the better team. I believe in that. I believe we're the more physical team. I believe we have everything it takes to be a Super Bowl champion. But that guy scares me to death, and that was Patrick Mahomes. And a 20-10 fourth quarter lead turned into a 31-20 loss.
Yeah.
Just like that. I believe that the Chiefs know that their legacy as a team is dependent on this game. It's one thing to go to 5 AFC championship games. It's another thing to win a Super Bowl. But if you get through this run and you only have one ring to show for it, the legacy of the team becomes a question. And I think this is a game where Kelsey, Jones, Mahomes, Willie Gay, a lot of those players that have been around for a few years are going to say, this is our legacy game. This is the game that cements us as the team of a certain era, like the Packers of the 60s, the Steelers of the 70s, the Niners of the 80s, the Cowboys of the 90s, and the Patriots of the 2000s and the 2010s. I think they know, even though the Eagles are slight favors, I think the pressure is all on Kansas City to place themselves among the great teams in NFL history.
They might know that, and the pressure might be on them, but how are these injuries going to impact them? The injuries that Mahomes is dealing with, that wide receiver core, are they going to be able to survive those injuries enough to get that Super Bowl ring?
I believe they can.
Okay.
Everybody's been a full participant in practice the last couple of days. Obviously, you're not really doing a lot right now.
Yeah.
But from everything I'm hearing, L'Jarius Sneed is cleared concussion protocol. Willie Gay is expected to play. Nicole's on IR, so he's not going to play. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to play, a little more depth at running back. And I think Juju and Kadarius are all set and ready to roll. To be honest with you, the biggest injury concern for me in this game is not a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. It's Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, that shoulder injury.
No one really talks about it, okay, because it hasn't had to be a thing.
Right.
But, he hasn't been right since he hurt it against the Bears. And it's not just a shoulder sprain. Trust me. After this game, you're gonna hear the news. Jalen Hurts is going to need shoulder surgery.
Yeah.
It always comes out after the game, okay, after the season is over. Wow, I didn't know. How did this happen? He didn't have to throw it at all against the Giants.
No.
Didn't have to throw it at all against San Francisco because the Niners just puked all over themselves. And, give the Eagles credit that good teams take advantage of other teams' mistakes.
It's hard when you have an 87th string quarterback.
Yeah, and most games are lost than won. They
Yeah.
really are. The Niners did all the things that cost them that game. But if you look at that game in two ways, he threw it at 11 completions, had 123 yards. Even on the throw that wasn't, the catch by the Slim Reaper, Devontae Smith, on 4th and 3, that was an overthrown ball.
Yeah.
He sailed a few. But more importantly, when you watched him run in that game, he either slid or ran out of bounds. Now, this is a guy that squatted 700 pounds in Oklahoma. He was a power lifter in high school. I've seen him drag players to the end zone. His shoulder is not right.
Right.
And if I'm Steve Spagnuolo, defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, I sell out to stop the run and basically say, prove to me you can win by throwing the football.
And, Stephen and I touched on this, earlier, but we saw him in some of the playoff games make those deep passes to A.J. Brown, and they didn't look
wasn't
great.
The same.
No, it just
wasn't
was not the
now,
same.
Listen, he could be healed, and it could not be an issue.
Yeah.
But if I'm the Chiefs, you got to show it to me before I'll believe it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the location that we're at right now.
Yeah.
It is the first time a Super Bowl has ever been hosted in a legal betting jurisdiction. Now, you've covered many an NFL game, many a Super Bowl before, but how does the atmosphere change now that people here can get in on the action?
Well, we always used to talk about it without talking about it,
Yep.
right? Like Al Michaels was famous for saying, and that kick is very important for some people in the desert. For years on NFL Live, we used to do preseason game win totals, but we couldn't say over/under. We'd say more than or less than.
Skirt around it.
Yeah, and you couldn't say the name of the franchise because those are syndicated and licensed. So you had to say the team in Dallas. Are they going to win more than or less than 9.5 games? Well, now it's all out in the open. And, it's always been there.
Betting has always been there.
The injury report exists so you can set the line correctly so everybody has the same information. Like, that's the whole point of the injury report, to set the line right. So nobody's getting inside information. It's just out in the open now, and it's so much better.
And talking about, we've done this whole show on props. So Do you have any insights for us on the Caesars Sportsbook? First of all, you guys have one of the biggest catalogs released by any.
Over 2,000 ways to bet, including lots of great prop bets.
Yeah, it's amazing. Every year they release that. Do you have, are there top props being bet at Caesars Sportsbook? Do you have a favorite prop?
I have a couple, actually.
All right.
One of them is the idea of a safety.
Okay.
Okay. We've had 9 safeties in Super Bowl history, 4 in the last 14 Super Bowls. It's plus 835, so the odds are pretty good.
Yeah.
And then let's add in, you have the top 2 sack teams in the NFL here, Philadelphia and Kansas City. So let's say one team gets pinned down near the goal line, where you got those vicious pass rushes coming in. Ball comes out. Ball's on the ground. Somebody's got to jump on it. I like the idea of a safety in this game. And I also like the idea of a 2-point conversion. We haven't had one since the Patriots had 2 in their epic comeback in Super Bowl 51. I think that's plus 240 for the 2-point conversion. And in a game that's this close, it's 1.5. I think it may go down to 1 or even below that by the time Super Bowl Sunday rolls around. Somebody's going to try 2-point conversion potentially to give themselves an advantage in this game. I like that bet a lot.
Knowing what the Eagles do at the goal line and how they're able to just push people right through. I actually like that 2-point conversion one too. Are you betting any of the fun ones? The Gatorade shower, the coin toss, any of the novelty props? Are you staying away from those?
It's funny. The coin toss is the biggest bet every year. And
every year. People love it.
And I just okay, so now what? Well, there it is. I don't know. The fun one would be, I think, the over-under on Rihanna songs at halftime is at 9.5, I think is what it is. There's all kinds of. My favorite prop bet of all time is the prop bet that started the whole craze. In 1986, Caesars Palace bet put 20-1 odds that William the Refrigerator Perry, the defensive tackle for the Bears, would score an offensive touchdown. Because Mike Ditka put him in goal line situations, and he did in the third quarter. That got so much action, it went from 20-1 to 2-1 odds by the time the Super Bowl kicked off, Super Bowl 20. And so now they still have that bet, a defensive player to score an offensive touchdown. Only one other player has done it in Super Bowl history, and that's Mike Vrabel, the linebacker for the Patriots, who caught a touchdown pass from Tom Brady in Super Bowl 38 and in Super Bowl 39.
I really thought you were going to put me on the spot there, and I did not have the answer for it, so I'm glad you came prepared.
Happy to help.
With the answer. Trey, thank you so much for joining us, as always. Now it's time to focus in on the quarterbacks, and it's a battle between 2 of the best in the league. However, injuries make QB props not so straightforward this year. Mahomes is dealing with an ankle injury, and Hurts has a shoulder injury. Let's send it over to Josh Lander and Nate Weitzer, hosts of the Lines Coast to Coast podcast, to see how they are tackling quarterback props on Sunday.
We are looking at some Super Bowl props here, Nate, for these quarterbacks that we've got, probably the 2 best players and most exciting guys to look at in this game. We're going to go a couple of Hurts props here, a couple Mahomes props, maybe some funky stuff that we're looking at if you want to get some giant odds and some juice back here in this Super Bowl. Go ahead and kick us off, Nate, with your first Jalen Hurts prop.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to target the passing props based on just game flow and run funnel defenses, but I think this is a matchup where Hurts really should use his legs more than anything. 39 yards against San Francisco's top tier run defense. They obviously controlled that game from start to finish, but really the number one thing I'm looking at with this matchup is Philly's going to be able to control the line of scrimmage on both sides. There's absolutely nothing teams can do to stop the power formation that they use at the goal line on short yardage. So I think 11 attempts for Hurts at even money is good bet. I mean, that's what he got against San Francisco. I do think the Eagles will be ahead most of this game. I don't think Kansas City can stop the run. I mean, they couldn't contain Joe Burrow. They allowed the 5th most rushing yards to QBs on the season. And in the 3 previous playoff games before that Bengals game, they were giving up 5.3 yards per carry. We know Philly's a run-heavy team, obviously, and Hurts is just, even more important than that stable of 3 running backs they use. So 48.5 rushing yards is up to that. It was originally a little bit lower on some sites, but now pretty much the market standard at MGM minus 115 odds. And for him to have those attempts, even better. And then there's some touchdown stuff that you could look at with 2 touchdowns being plus 500. I don't think that's out of the question. Look, if they get it down to the 1, it's not really a secret who's going to get the ball, and you can't stop it.
You can't. Yeah, you can't stop the best 4th and 1, team in the history of the NFL. We saw that in the last game. I like all this with you as well. I mean, definitely the attempts at that even money there. I really like. The The attempts last week, I think you probably would have seen a few more if this was a closer game. I don't think they wanted to necessarily put Hurts in a position to have to gain yardage for them once they're already up a couple scores against a team that doesn't have a quarterback in one of the wildest games we've ever seen in an NFC Championship game for sure. But yeah, I think the attempts are going to be there a bit more. They're going to do a little bit of what we talked about last week against San Francisco, which is neutralize that pass rush. Obviously, they can probably throw on those DBs, but why even put yourself in a situation to get that Chris Jones and company going? So moving on to Hurts and some passing stuff here. I'm actually going under. I think probably lines up a bit with what our game theory here is, in minus 115 on MGM. He's gone under this number twice this postseason. Not that he really needed to really, put it through the air after going up big early in both those games and staying on top. He hasn't really even topped 200 yards, and really he only went over 245 5 times this season. The last one being back in December. And if you look at who he went over 245 yards against, we're talking about Tennessee, the worst pass defense in terms of yards per game allowed. Minnesota, the 31st team there, and then Chicago, Pitt, both 15th and 13th in yards per game allowed. So, Washington had a good defense early, and he still was able to get over that. But I think that there's opportunity here against, that defensive backfield for KC. It's not necessarily great, but they're still only allowing 6 yards per pass, 221 yards per game, and that's really just thanks to the second highest sack rate in the league this season, and they're much more vulnerable versus the run. So obviously we're targeting a bit more for one of the best run teams in the league in Philly to be able to do that a bit more and not necessarily need to go deep, even though they've also got incredible wide receiver room over there. But 19th in opponents' yards per rush for KC this season. And then, like I said, the Eagles ran the ball the most times per game, more than 33 times this season in each of these games, over 150 yards rushing per game, and they're still boasting that the best offensive line in the NFL this season. So all those run guys and company, I think it's a good opportunity for them to get rushing yards and not necessarily even need him to get over that 246.5.
Yeah, I mean, same theory really with under on the completions or the attempts for Hurts. It's a game flow bet that you think the Eagles will be in control, and it will be, I find it dangerous to think it'll be exactly like how they just rolled through the Giants and the Niners. I think it will be a much more competitive game, which is why I'm maybe a little shying away from the yardage, because these teams did play in the regular season last year, and it was a total shootout. KC's not great on against the pass or the run, and they have some injuries back there. But the Eagles, when it comes down to it, want to just run the ball, and they want to protect Hurts in that shoulder and just kind of pound the rock. So yeah, I think you're on point there. Switching over to Mahomes, I think we're both on the same page in terms of just volume for him. Yeah. You said the attempts. I'm going completions, 25.5, pretty much even money at Caesars. And he's hit that in at least in 6 of his last 7 playoff games, the exception being against Jacksonville, where he totally messed up his ankle and was hopping around there. But last time in the Super Bowl against Tampa Bay, while running for his life, 26 for 49. And it might be another situation like that with this Eagles pass rush. I mean, either way, KC's just rushing attack is non-existent. 42 yards against Cincy. You look at 46 against Denver and 77 against Seattle in 2 of their last 3 regular season. And Mahomes had 29 completions in those last 2 against Cincy and Denver. Good run defenses. I know Philly's even better against the pass than the run on the season. They have excellent corners, but the Chiefs, with 2 weeks with Andy Reid, time to scheme guys open. Mahomes will find different receivers. They'll use those tight ends. They'll use McKinnon, and he'll just rack up completions. Everything's going to go through him. They had a 70% pass play rate even with him on the bum ankle, and pulled out that game. And there should be plenty of possessions because Philly's first in neutral pace, and they're even 9th in pace once they have a 7-point lead. So if we, again, think the Chiefs are coming from behind, that's why we like the volume for Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, I have no reason to disagree with anything you're saying because, like you said, I'm going over attempts, and those are an astronomical 39.5. I kind of hope he's not running for his life to ensure that we can get these completions and pass attempts up. And if he starts actually putting together, 8-yard rushes, 10-yard rushes, and those chunk yards there, his 18.5 rushing yards kind of seems low for a Super Bowl game, like you said, where he's going to have the ball in his hands a ton of times. And hopefully he's able to avoid guys like Hassan Riddick and who is just a quarterback eater at this point, because he's going to be able to, I mean, he's a little bit more mobile, obviously, than the guys we've been seeing him, this Eagles team go up against in the postseason. So I think he'll be fine there, because he did look fine. He had that one rush for 8 yards. Looked fine. I know it was only one, but at least he didn't look hobbled enough to be able to get out. And I think the pass attempts, keeping it there, like I thought about the completions, it's a bit better juice at even money versus the minus 108 for 39.5 pass attempts. Plus 39.5 pass attempts is much more intimidating than the number 25.5 for completions, I think, for Mahomes. But when it matters, you're going to put the ball in Pat Mahomes' hands, right? And that's been true in games that matter this season. It's been true in the last 2 Super Bowls, 42 attempts and then 49 attempts in the last one that they played in. So he's going to have the ball in his hands. You're not going to take it out of that, and he can run, but I don't think they want him to have to do that quite as much. He's had 7 games this season with 40 plus pass attempts. All but one came in November or later, kind of adding to the fact that they were playing a bit more closer games. There was that streak where they just didn't cover but kept winning, as we continue to talk about in our prop show as well. And so, like I said, they all came in later times in the season when they needed to really wrap up that 1 seed. And once again, you put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands. All those games were 1 score or less, just the exception being the game against the Rams, where you don't run on the Rams, right? So the games that he did have 40 plus pass attempts, their average margin of victory was 3.8. In games with less than 40, we're talking about an average margin of victory of 10.8. They just didn't need him to throw. And they're going to need him to throw. It's the Super Bowl. There's no way they're blowing out the Eagles. I think if anybody's on blowout alert a bit more, it could be them if the Eagles control the ball a ton more. I don't see it going that way in either direction necessarily. But I do think that the fact that it's going to be close is all going to correlate to Mahomes throwing the ball 42, 45 times in that range, much more likely than any time in the 30s.
Yeah, it all flows back to what we think, which is that the Eagles are going to control the game. And as long as the Chiefs are trying to play catch up, Mahomes is going to be dropping back a lot. Also, the rushing yards are pretty good. Found good odds for the rush attempts, plus 115 for him to rush 4 times. And that ankle is going to be much better in 2 weeks. So that's another one we're looking at, and using that odds finder tool to find the best value at all books. And that's all the time we have for this one. Everybody, good luck with your bets in the Super Bowl.
Now, Stephen, I actually agree with Nate here on the Hurts over rushing attempts. I think Hurts is going to use his legs a lot in this matchup. Hurts and the Eagles have 31 conversions on 3rd and 4th downs this season, and that is due in large part to Hurts' ability to rush the ball and use his legs. And this is an aggressive Eagles team, and I just don't see the game plan stopping for the Super Bowl. Now, no other team in Super Bowl history has converted more than twice on 4th downs. I think the Eagles have a chance to do that here and break that record. I think they're going to go for it on 4th down and try to keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands. What are your key takeaways from what they said?
I'm with you, Nicole. I've bet something related to this. I didn't bet specifically the Jalen Hurts rushing props, but I bet under his passing yards in this game, under 240.5. In the 230s is probably where I'd stop. I think there's an edge there a little bit if we're in the 240s, if you look at the way it's gone this year for him in the games where he's been healthy. But that's the key here. He has not been healthy. He's missed deep passes. He's had some of his worst yards per attempt games in the passing game in the playoffs. The shoulder is not right. He's missed A.J. Brown streaking to the end zone each of the past 2 playoff games. But I don't think that's going to stop him from sucking it up, taking some shots, if necessary, to get some yardage here. And the Eagles have 3 times as many touchdowns in the red zone on the ground than they do in the air. Yep. So I like him to possibly get in the end zone using his legs. I like his rushing attempts, like you said, because their read option game, their RPO game is so difficult to defend. The 49ers decided to just take Jalen Hurts away and try and stop the running backs on those reads. It didn't work. They got gashed for some touchdowns. There's a chance that the Chiefs try and take the running backs away and see if Jalen Hurts can do some damage. So we'll see how that goes, but I'm in lockstep with you on Jalen Hurts, and I agree with the guys. I think the Chiefs are going to live or die with Patrick Mahomes. I don't think with the Super Bowl on the line they're going to give Isaiah Pacheco 20-plus carries in this game. And there have been some good arguments to be made that the Eagles' passing defense is not as good as what the numbers indicate. This is number one passing offense versus number one passing defense if you look at advanced metrics.
Yeah.
But against top half offenses this year, the Eagles have been well below average. 30-plus points to the Lions allowed, 30-plus points to Washington allowed, 30-plus to the Packers allowed. So I think there's an argument to be made there that Mahomes can take advantage of this defense in the interior passing game. We'll see how it goes.
We've talked about that a lot. Sometimes what you see on paper isn't indicative of what you see on the screen and how you feel that those teams are performing. And we're going to get to Isaiah Pacheco. We're actually going to get to him next. So we are switching gears and taking a look at running back props. We're going to toss it over to Derek Wagner to break those down for us.
All right, we're going to start with Chiefs running backs props. I'm going to look at Isaiah Pacheco. I got his over at 48.5 rush yards. Best available number is 47.5. The Eagles defense was bottom 10 in rush success rate this year and number 1 in dropback EPA. I just think that this number is a little bit soft for Pacheco, and the Eagles defense was bottom 10 in yards per carry with 4.6. He's averaging about 5 yards per carry. This is a tough matchup for the Eagles front to stop him. Additionally, Pacheco is one of the better backs in yards after contact per attempt with 3.1. That's 13th in the NFL with running backs with a minimum of 100 snaps or 100 carries. Dameon Pierce actually kind of gutted the Eagles defense back in week 9 with over 100 yards after contact. So this is another back that is posing a problem for the Eagles defense. Additionally, Pacheco went over this number in 5 of the last 7 games and is averaging 61.4 yards on the ground in those last 7 games. I think this number is a little bit soft for Pacheco. Then we're going to look at McKinnon. I didn't really see much value on McKinnon props. His over-under rush yards is set at 20.5. This is really low because he's averaging less than 2 yards per carry in the postseason so far. So I didn't really find any value on McKinnon rushing yards. And then we're going to flip over to the Eagles side. I'm not going to touch on Miles Sanders too much. This number for him, his rush yards, was sitting at 58.5. Then now the best number you can find is 55.5. I think this is a fair number for him, so I don't really want to touch it. Kenneth Gainwell, on the other hand, I like his over rush yards at 18.5 minus 114 to the over. He's averaging over 6 yards per carry in the postseason. He had 14 carries for 48 against the Niners and 12 for 112 yards against the Giants. He's just been the better back in the postseason for the Eagles. Miles Sanders is sitting at 4.7 yards a carry, while Gainwell's at 6.2. I like Gainwell to go over this number. All it takes is 3 rushes for him to get this number. So I really like this number for Gainwell. And then the last prop that I'm going to touch on is Boston Scott and Gainwell to score a touchdown. I'm going to take 1 unit and split it in half. I'm going to take Gainwell at plus 360 and Boston Scott at plus 550. Combined, they've scored 10 touchdowns this season. They just falter a lot of touchdowns from Miles Sanders. So you could play Sanders anytime touchdown if you want, but I just think the value is on Gainwell or Scott to get in at these numbers. Like, you're going to profit either way if one of them gets in. So take a unit, split it in half, bet both Gainwell and Scott to score a touchdown.
Now, Stephen, it is no doubt that Isaiah Pacheco has become a very dynamic weapon for the Chiefs. He led the Chiefs in rushing yards during the regular season and will be looking to exploit the Eagles' run defense. Now, he rushed for 50 or more yards in 9 of 13 games, but the only thing that holds me up for this one is what we saw him do against the Bengals.
And, don't remind me.
Oh, I was going to get to it. Exactly. When Patrick Mahomes threw to him quite a few times, I believe his line was over 48.5 rushing yards, and you were pretty confident going into that game. What we didn't foresee was that he was going to become one of the top receivers for Patrick Mahomes in that game. Now, I still think that Mahomes is going to toss it to him here because of all the injuries that they're dealing with in their wide receiver core. So for me, I'm actually going to stay off of this one, but what are your thoughts?
So you mentioned the wide receivers. I agree with that. But we get to Super Bowl week, and it seems sometimes we forget to check the injury report sometimes. And I think the one that's important here that nobody has talked about for the Chiefs is that Jerick McKinnon is on the injury report. And he's not listed with an ankle injury. He's listed with ankles injuries.
Hard to run without either ankle.
Yeah, so he was a full participant, but clearly that may have been the reason why Pacheco got some more run in the passing game in the AFC Championship game. There's a chance we might see it again in this one. But I agree that the books have been slow. Caesars has been slow to adjust up Isaiah Pacheco's rushing totals here.
Yeah.
And I like betting the over there on Pacheco. Now, the flip side here with the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm not betting Kenny Gainwell overs like Derek is. I actually disagree vehemently with the adjustment that the books have made and what Caesars has made. We're basically almost at double the number for Kenny Gainwell rushing yards at Caesars of what he was in the last couple of playoff games because he's done very well. But you need to look at why. The vast majority, more than 75% of his touches have come when the Eagles already have been blowing out the Giants and the San Francisco 49ers. If you think this game is going to be close, and Caesars has this line as a 1-point game, then Miles Sanders is going to be on the field for the majority of these games. So I get it if you want to bet Kenny Gainwell off of what he's done in the first couple of playoff games, but just because you bet Kenny Gainwell overs does not mean you shouldn't also bet Miles Sanders overs, because the matchup in this game is my favorite of the entire situation here between the Chiefs and the Eagles. The Eagles' running game against the Chiefs' rush defense. The Eagles are so dominant this year. They're one of the all-time great rushing offenses. The gap between them and the next best rushing offense from number 1 to number 2 in both EPA and success rate is the same as the gap between the number 2 and the 14 team and the number 2 and number 18 team.
And we've touched on this multiple times.
Yes.
We've touched on that gap.
Absolutely. So I love Miles Sanders overs everywhere. Caesars has alt totals on Miles Sanders. You can get anytime touchdowns. I even like a sprinkle on 2+ touchdowns. There's a market where you can bet who's going to have the most rushing yards, who's going to be the first to get to 30 yards, 40 yards, 50 rushing yards. Basically, I've bet more money on Miles Sanders than any other thing in this Super Bowl. That's my favorite angle in this one. I'm very confident, and I've also bet on him to win Super Bowl MVP as well. So,
we got a lot of Miles Sanders,
yes.
And I hear you're doing Pacheco again. You're going Isaiah. Listen,
God help me. The minute I saw Jerick McKinnon on the injury report, I had to. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was also activated for this game. He's been out for a long time. I can't see him having a meaningful role when he's been out for so long. Maybe he gets a couple snaps, but they've been riding Pacheco more and more and more. There's no reason to think that he's going to get the volume here.
Yeah. We have talked about quarterback injuries already, but another area where this is going to be a concern is when we take a look at this wide receivers. Now, especially for the Chiefs. Mecole Hardman is out. Juju Smith-Schuster has been out with a knee injury since the Bengals game. Kadarius Toney will play, but he's dealing with an ankle and also some hamstring issues. Now, on the other side of the ball, the Eagles are one of the healthiest teams we've seen enter a Super Bowl. And, that is, for me, going to cause a little bit of concern when I'm taking a look at these matchups, and why I've said I do think Pacheco might get tossed the ball a few more times than we're used to seeing. We're going to go ahead and send it over to Jeffrey Schreiber to talk us through how he is handling these wide receiver props.
So before I dive into all these props for the Philadelphia wide receiver core, I just wanted to give a big picture matchup for all Philadelphia's wide receivers before we dive into specifics. No pass defense was impacted more during the regular season than the Chiefs' pass defense as to whether they put pressure on the opposing quarterback or not. It's interesting, when the Chiefs got pressure on the opposing quarterback, they allowed the 6th lowest completion rate in the league at 42% and a league low 3.6 yards per pass attempt. However, when the Chiefs didn't get pressure on the opposing quarterback, they allowed a league-high 74.7% completion rate, 7.8 yards per pass attempt, and a 5.5% touchdown rate, which was 30th in the league. So with that being said, there's a bunch of overs here that I'm going to look to take, with the first one being Devontae Smith over 4.5 catches on Caesars, minus 167 on the juice. A couple of reasons here. Throwing out last week's blowout win, Smith had 5+ catches in 7 straight games heading into Championship Sunday. The Eagles throw the ball at the highest rate in the league to their wide receivers. In 3 of the last 4 games for the Chiefs, at least 2 opposing wide receivers in each game had 5+ catches. So look for Brown, look for Smith to get their hands on the football in the Super Bowl. Smith entered championship week earning 8 targets or more in 10 straight games. So I'm going to be hammering that over 4.5 for Devonta Smith. The next prop over here that I got is A.J. Brown to score an anytime touchdown at plus 129 on Caesars. Kansas City conceded the second most touchdowns to all wide receivers during the regular season, specifically getting torched by wide receiver ones. No team allowed more receiving touchdowns to opposing wide receiver ones did than the Chiefs. And also notably, Hurts missed a wide open A.J. Brown in both the divisional and NFC championship game in the end zone. I think the positive touchdown regression is going to be coming for A.J. Brown in the Super Bowl. The last one over here that I'm going to dive into is Quez Watkins to go over 10.5 yards. 11.5 yards on Caesars. In close games this season of 7 points or less, Quez runs significantly higher percentage routes, which ultimately leads to more potential targets and yards. The Super Bowl has a 1.5 point spread. Fans can make confidently a case that the Eagles are going to throw more than they had to over the last couple of weeks. And if you look into the specific matchups, Watkins runs the most slot routes among the Eagles wide receiver core at 75.9%. And it's noteworthy that Kansas City has been a really good matchup for opposing slot wide receivers. The Chiefs were 29th in touchdown rate to opposing slots during the year. And just looking at the divisional round, Christian Kirk gave the secondary fits. Last week, Tyler Boyd, slot wide receiver, was on his way to a big game until he ultimately got hurt. So it's looking like Watkins should go over here. And in his last 10 games to close the regular season, he exceeded this over-under of 11.5 in 8 of the last 10. So I'm hammering this. These props are with the expectation that this game stays within one score, which should put some pressure on Philly to display their aerial attack. And these are the 3 props that I'm going to hammer for Super Bowl Sunday. And good luck with all your bets.
Now, Stephen, Jeffrey is absolutely hammering the overs when it comes to these Eagle wide receivers props. And I feel like you are on the same wavelength as him for some of these. So talk us through that.
Some of them. I think, first of all, the Chiefs wide receivers, Caesars was late to put those numbers out because of the injury concerns. They wanted to see how clean the injury report was. And some of those numbers were low. And the first, I'm actually going to talk about an under first because Jeffrey took all the
he took all the overs.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling had more than 100 yards in the AFC Championship game. But why did that happen? It's because Juju got hurt, and he started taking over the slot role, something we haven't seen him do a lot of the year. He's going to be, barring health of the other wide receivers, MVS is going to be back on the outside, which is the strength of the Eagles' secondary. Whether he's lined up against Darius Slay or James Bradbury, that's a brutal matchup for MVS. So I like unders here for MVS. Okay. With the injury concerns for the Chiefs, though, how can anybody be confident that Kadarius Toney or Juju Smith-Schuster are going to be able to play through this entire game? So what did we see in the AFC title game when they had to leave the field? We saw Sky Moore get 7 targets. We've seen games this year where Justin Watson has had big splash plays. He's had 5 games this year with receptions of at least 25-plus yards. So if you're looking for a long shot in the Caesars prop catalog in this Super Bowl, I think you look at some of these backup wide receivers for the Kansas City Chiefs, a Sky Moore, a Justin Watson, and see if you can get some juicy numbers on them, whether it's first to 40 yards or anytime touchdown, or if the logic is that maybe Toney or Juju's not going to be able to finish the game, why not sprinkle some money on each of these guys to score the last touchdown in the game if that's when they're more likely to be in the game?
Right.
So you can get 40-1 or higher on these guys to score the last touchdown in this game. So I think, if you're looking for a long shot, if you're looking to have some fun, some lunch money, I think those backup wide receivers is where you should be looking.
Yeah, I like that play as well. And next up, we've got what I think is a very fun market because we've got the tight ends, and that's none other than the amazing Travis Kelce. And I gotta give huge props to the Kelce brothers for putting out absolutely amazing content the week leading up to the Super Bowl. They are going to be the first two brothers who have faced each other in a Super Bowl game. Their parents are absolutely phenomenal to watch, and I think everyone loves betting on Travis Kelce, and Mo is going to touch on that. So let's go ahead and send it over to Mo. Here to break down Super Bowl props for the tight ends is Mo Nawara.
For tight end props for the Super Bowl, I think obviously we have two pretty high volume tight ends, and most people are going to be most interested in betting Travis Kelce props probably. I'm a little more interested in Dallas Goedert, but starting off with Travis Kelce, most of his numbers are right around his kind of season averages, which I think is probably about where he should end up in this matchup. There's nothing like too crazy one way or the other about the Eagles' defense against tight ends. I think a couple variables that could push it one way or the other would be, it kind of did seem like he was a little limited toward the end of that Bengals game with the back injury. Should be good, but just you never know if that could re-aggravate. And more importantly, I think the Chiefs receivers could kind of push him one way or the other if they are playing and make it through the game healthy. I don't know if that would help or hurt him, honestly, because he might just draw a ton of defensive attention if they're out, but he'll also get a ton of targets. So those two things could kind of cancel out. The one that sticks out the most to me, honestly, with Kelce is I do think his prop to score a touchdown might be a little bit lower than it should be. You can get as low as minus 114 in the middle of Super Bowl week here. His career numbers with Mahomes suggest he should be closer to minus 140 on that one. And then his playoff numbers with Mahomes are like insane. He scored, I think it was 15 touchdowns in 17 games. So I do think there's something to him being maybe a little bit of a bigger part of the playoff offense when push comes to shove. So that's the one I would most look toward for the Chiefs here. I do think their passing offense is going to have success against the Eagles. So Travis Kelce should be the biggest beneficiary of that. And yeah, he's definitely the most likely player to score here for the Chiefs. On the other side of it, we have Dallas Goedert, who has been a little bit quiet after a really, really strong start to the season. I don't know if it's all his fault. I'm wondering if a lot of it is due to Jalen Hurts' shoulder. He just hasn't seemed to be able to get the ball downfield. And that's making me look toward a bet I made in the 49ers game, which was under on his long play, which is looks like you can get 19.5, under 19.5 minus 115. I think that's another good play here. Average depth of target his last three games is 3.9, 4.8, and 3.5. So they just don't seem to be using him as anything but kind of a safety valve / check down guy. Overall, just I think A.J. Brown has pushed him a little closer to the line of scrimmage. Just A.J. Brown commanding so many downfield targets. Some of them I think used to maybe be going to Goddard here. So I do think that one, even though the Chiefs are not as strong as the 49ers in terms of limiting tight ends, I do think under 19.5 is probably a good play, given how limited Jalen Hurts has been. Just seems to be not surpassing really 150 yards passing since he came back. So I do like that one. And whether you tail these or not, best of luck hunting value on the tight end props here for the Super Bowl.
Now, Stephen, I'm with Mo on this one. I do think Kelce is going to have a touchdown in this game, so I do like his anytime touchdown odds over at Caesars Sportsbook, but I do not think it's going to be easy. Now, Kelce is just behind Jerry Rice and tied with Gronk for the most touchdowns in postseason history. And I don't think anyone is doubting his ability to get in the end zone, but this Philly pass defense has only allowed 3 touchdowns to opposing tight ends in 19 games. So I do feel that, listen, we all know about this brotherly matchup, and I think, Mahomes and Kelce have that connection where he's going to try to get him the ball and he's going to try to get him a touchdown in this game that means so much. But again, it's going to be hard to get a past that Philly pass defense, but I still am with Mo. I do like him to score a touchdown here in this game. How do you feel about this matchup?
I think Caesars has made the odds low enough for you to take a shot on the anytime touchdown. You're getting a better price than you would in a typical week for Travis Kelce to score a touchdown. I think it is another injury concern. He was not able to finish the AFC title game with that back issue. So I agree with Mo there. I agree with you there. I think if anybody's going to go off in the Chiefs passing attack, it's obviously going to be Travis Kelce, because he's working the interior away from the Eagles' top corners, Bradbury and Slay, on the outsides. We'll see if the Eagles pull kind of a Belichickian move and maybe move some guys around, whether it's bracketing Kelce or moving maybe one of those corners to the inside to try and help with that. That, to me, is the most fascinating chess match in this game, is how are the Eagles going to cover Travis Kelce, considering that their corners overall are more than talented enough to handle this kind of replacement level receiving core that the Chiefs have gone with in the wake of Tyreek Hill being traded coming into this season. So I think if there's a game where it finally comes back to bite the Chiefs in the behind, it might be this one against maybe the best secondary in the NFL. On the flip side here, though, I also did bet the Dallas Goedert under 19.5 yards for his long reception in this game. I think Mo makes excellent points about that. His average depth of target has just plummeted this year with A.J. Brown on the field. Combine that with Jalen Hurts appearing to struggle to throw the ball downfield.
Yeah.
They've basically made him a check down at this point. So we bet it in the AFC title game, Mo and I, and I'm right back with them again in the Super Bowl on that one.
I do think we need to coin Belichickian. I don't know if that's anyone's ever used that term, but I think I like that term. But yeah, I agree with you on Hurts. We really haven't seen him take a ton of deep shots, and
since before the injury.
Yeah, and like you said, now that we have the injury, if he is taking them, not as accurate as we've seen.
And if he does, I'm not sure it's going to Goddard anyway, right?
Right.
Like Devonta Smith is a pristine route runner.
Yeah.
AJ Brown is amazing after the catch. Those are the guys that are going to get chunk plays, I think, not Dallas Goedert, with the way he's being utilized this season with the Eagles.
Yeah. Next up, we have Evan Scrimshaw, and he's going to go over how to bet kicker props for the Super Bowl. So Evan, go ahead and take it away.
For this year's Super Bowl, kickers are actually one of the more lucrative markets available to bet on if you know what you're looking for. The biggest market for them is total points kicked. For both Butker and Drake Elliott, you have a line of 7.5, which is interesting depending on how you think the game is going to go. Both offenses are favored to score more than 2.5 touchdowns, offensive touchdowns in this game, which means that if you think that bet hits, then you think that both teams need to score at least 5 offensive possessions need to end in a score for them to hit their numbers. With Jake Elliott, that seems unlikely. Not that the Eagles couldn't score that many points, but they just don't kick that many field goals. With the Eagles only averaging 1.4 field goal attempts per game in the regular season, and as we know, Nick Sirianni's been quite willing to be aggressive in the playoffs, it's unlikely that the 7.5 is going to hit for Elliott. Butker has a better chance too because the Chiefs kick 1.9 field goals per game, and we know that Andy Reid doesn't get more aggressive in the playoffs, as seen by his punt from the opposition 37 in the wildcard round, or in the championship round. And even if Pat Mahomes is more healthy than he was, he still wasn't particularly mobile in the conference championship game. And if that means that the Chiefs are going to have some offensive upside, but maybe not as much offensive upside, then maybe they're not going to be able to get 3 touchdowns. Maybe they're going to have more drives stall out, and that means Butker is a much better bet over 7.5 total than Jake Elliott. For the same reason, Butker's a much better bet in a head-to-head matchup. Butker only minus 120 at Caesars Sportsbook, because there's the half field goal advantage in terms of regular season average field goal attempts. Butker has the leg to hit from deep. We know Andy Reid is not as aggressive as Sirianni, and we know that Sirianni is willing to run Jalen Hurts in key moments. We know that they're willing to take a 4th and 5 in the NFC Championship game on that first drive. Like, Sirianni just isn't going to get into a field goal kicking competition if he can avoid it, and so Butker is a great bet there. On over field goals made, I think Elliott under minus 1.5, under 1.5, it makes a lot of sense. They've averaged 1.4 so far this season. The Eagles are not going to kick field goals unless they have to. Sirianni is not about kicking field goals. And so I think that's good. Butker over 1.5 makes sense. The problem is, though, there's a chance that the Chiefs fall behind in this game, especially if Mahomes isn't 100%, in which case they just kind of can't kick field goals because they have to just keep going for it. But if you think the Chiefs are competitive in this game, Butker over his 1.5 makes a lot of sense. And then the biggest thing, I think, the most interesting one for me is the overall over-under on point after attempts. The Eagles are minus 200 in market to score more than 2.5 offensive touchdowns. But there's about an 80-cent gap between what you'd pay on over 2.5 touchdowns and what you'd pay on over 2.5 field goal or point after attempts. For Jake Elliott, like, unless the Eagles need to, they're not going to go for 2. I know they can be aggressive, and I know they do trust their offense, but that 80-cent gap makes Elliott, if you think the Eagles are going to score a lot of points in this game, that makes that 80-cent gap much more valuable. For the Chiefs, it's only a 40-cent gap in VIG. You're only getting a 40-cent reduction for Butker over 2.5. And I think the Chiefs against that Eagles offense, or against that Eagles defense, I think is going to be a much harsher competition for them. Lastly, some books have a fun novelty prop, which is will there be a doink, a ball that hits the upright or the crossbar. It might be fun, and if you're an Eagles fan and you believe in the karma of Nick Foles against the Bears, you might want to put a little money on for peace of mind. But doinks, as fun as they are, the reason we remember them so well is because they're really rare. So I wouldn't go about putting a lot of your money on that, but it's a fun prop. And with all props, good luck with the Super Bowl bets, and hopefully you make some money.
Now, Stephen, I'm going to be honest. This isn't a market that I've taken a big look at, but after...
kickers are people too, Nicole.
Kickers are people too, and I don't know why I haven't taken a look at it. And honestly, after all of Evan's, analytics, and I mean, I should have been talking to Evan earlier this season, but now I'm really thinking I should have taken a look at the kicking prop bet market. Do you have a feeling about these prop bets? Are you betting on the kickers or people too?
First of all, Evan Scrimshaw is also our political markets reporter.
Yes.
And this guy digs so deep to find mispriced odds in politics that he's basically gone like 90% on the markets there that he's written about.
Yeah.
So when he comes to me and he has an off-the-wall kicking bet that he likes, I'm listening, Nicole. So, and I just want to make sure everybody understands the one particular bet that he talked about here, because I think it's an important one. It's one I bet as well. He noted the contrast between the Eagles being heavily juiced at Caesars to go over 2.5 touchdowns in this game. For the Eagles offense to score more than 2.5 touchdowns. It's like minus 200 or shorter. If that's the case, if those odds are correct, why is Jake Elliott only minus 110 to kick 3 or more extra points? That difference in juice and that difference in price is far too wide. And I agree with Evan to take the over 2.5 PATs on Jake Elliott. I bet it as well. Let's have some fun with some kickers.
Let's have some fun with some kickers. Thank God we're not watching Dallas in the Super Bowl, because I wouldn't want to deal with that kicking
Jake
fiasco.
Elliott is like one of the great dependable kickers in the NFL. Knock on wood. Thankfully, no Brett Maher in this game.
We're getting into our final handful of markets here that we are going to be covering, and it's time to look at the opposite side of the ball and discuss some of these defensive props. Now, here to talk us through those is none other than Brett Gibbons. So, Brett, go ahead and take it away.
Defense wins championships. In each of the last 4 Super Bowls, the champions held their opponents to 20 points or fewer. That comes against offenses like the Chiefs and the Bengals. So I'm going to be talking about 2 player props on the defensive side that I really like for Super Bowl 57. First up, Chris Jones. He logged his first postseason sack of his career against the Bengals. In fact, he logged 2 of them. If you look at Caesars Sportsbook, yes, to record a sack, yes is minus 130, no is plus 100. But let's look at his sack opportunities. According to PFF, he recorded a DPR, which is a pressure, a hit, or a sack on the quarterback on 8.3% of his rushes. That's top 10 in the NFL. 18% of those DPR resulted in a sack outright. Now let's look at Jalen Hurts. 31.5 passing attempts. That's his prop. So we can kind of justify that, like, that's about the opportunity that Chris Jones is going to get to rush the passer. So if you take those numbers, we can expect about 0.47 sack opportunities for Chris Jones. Now, I'm factoring in the Eagles' elite offensive line, which is number 1 per PFF in pass blocking in the entire NFL. So I'm betting no at plus 100. I don't think that Chris Jones is going to record a sack in this game. What would this number have been if he didn't record a sack last game? And you can't really take a 1-game sample and expedite it out for his expectations. So the first one I'm taking is Chris Jones. No sack in Super Bowl 57. I don't think he gets home, and you can get even money for that one. The other one, Hassan Reddick of the Eagles. He's a menace. He's been a menace all year. Extremely good. Led the league in sacks outright. If you're looking at Caesars Sportsbook prop for Hassan Reddick to record a sack, it's yes, minus 170, no, plus 140. I want to talk about alignment really quick before we get into the opportunities. He lined up as what's called a wide 9 against the 49ers. That means he's outside by a couple of yards of the tackle. And if there's a tight end there, he lines up outside the tight end, right? This is to promote a good speed rush. Most of the year, he was lined up at a 7, which is just on the outside shade of the tackle versus most other opponents. But to emphasize the speed rush against maybe a slower tackle, they line him up at a wide 9. He's going up against the Chiefs' Andrew Wiley, who's the number 1 most penalized tackle in football. It's a little bit slower getting off the football. And Hassan Reddick, amazing at jumping the snap count. So I think, he almost looks like he's offsides on a lot of these plays. I think he's going to have a great advantage against Andrew Wiley. Now let's talk about that DPR, those opportunities. According to Pro Football Focus, he has a DPR on 10.9% of his rushes. That is second most in the NFL, just to Micah Parsons. And over 25% of those resulted in sacks. That is by far the most of anybody with the pass rush numbers that Hassan Reddick had this season. And you look at Patrick Mahomes, his pass attempt prop is set at 39.5. We're looking at maybe 40 dropbacks according to the sports books here, which you can deduce about 1.08 sack opportunities for Hassan Reddick. I don't love laying the minus 170 juice. That doesn't really get me all that excited, but I would absolutely bet that he gets at least half a sack. If you can find the number at 0.75, I would absolutely take the over. I would absolutely take the yes on Hassan Reddick to get a sack in Super Bowl 57.
All right, Stephen, I'm agreeing a lot on this show now. If you watch me on Beat the Closing Line, I don't tend to agree so much. I feel like every
So when you're late to breakfast tomorrow, it's because you went down the Caesars prop rabbit hole?
Exactly, and I'm betting what all of our guys are betting over at the lines. But I'm actually with Gibbons here on Hassan Reddick to get a sack. Now, this guy has been bullying offensive lines all season long, and if you add in this Patrick Mahomes injury to everything that Brett Gibbons just said, I think this play is even stronger. I mean, Mahomes is not going to be able to escape these sack attempts like we are used to seeing him do, running all around, escaping the pocket. Now, we saw him against Cincy struggle with speed, struggle with planting that foot. I really feel like we saw that come together when he had that fumble, right? Like he couldn't seem to plant on his leg to get on top of that ball. And he was hobbling around 2 weeks ago. I don't know how good it can be 2 weeks later. Now, obviously, the NFL has amazing medicine, better than we'll ever get in our lifetime, but I still think that injury is going to come into play, and I think that makes him even more vulnerable to Reddick, so I like that bet here as well with Gibbons. What about you?
I don't dislike it, but
letting me down easy.
I think everybody should consider that if you like Reddick to have a sack in this game, then you should probably like Josh Sweat on the opposite side of the pass rush to have a sack in this game at better odds. I think it's at least something you should think about. I know it's hard to get the image of Hassan Reddick mangling Brock Purdy's arm in the NFC Championship game out of your head, but that's why the price is what it is on Reddick. Whereas Josh Sweat was one of the 5 Eagles who had double-digit sacks this year. He also was the team leader in tackles for loss. Josh Sweat gets a lot of pressure, too, on the quarterback.
Yeah.
And he might actually have the better matchup against an elite Chiefs offensive line. In the 1 weak link of that potential Chiefs offensive line where they get penalized more often. The Chiefs, Andrew Wiley is among the league leaders in penalties from the tackle position, and that's who Josh Sweat's going to have in this matchup. So overall, personally, I'm not betting any sack props because I just have, I think, a lot of respect for both of these offensive lines. They are probably the two best offensive lines in football. The Chiefs are number one in the league in pass block win rate. The Eagles are right up there as well. The Eagles are number one in the league in run blocking. So I just think we have two of the best assembled offensive lines we've seen this entire season playing in the Super Bowl. I think it's going to be difficult on both pass rushes, even as good as the Eagles pass rush has been.
All right, I like it. Now, before we get into our final few props on today's show, just make sure you head over to the Lines Discord channel. We have a college basketball channel, an NFL channel, a college football channel, where our analysts talk you through their thought processes every week for each respective market.
Need even more sports betting insight? Then you're invited to join the Lines.com official Discord. To join, click on the icon on the top right-hand side of the Lines.com. Once you're in, head over to the Rolls channel. Here, you can opt in for free Bet Alert push notifications from any of the Lines writers. Whether you're looking to bet on the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, PGA Golf, or college sports, the Lines.com is here to help make you a better sports bettor.
Now, Stephen, we have finally made it to one of my absolute favorite Super Bowl props. Again, a prop that you can only bet in time for the Super Bowl, just like the coin toss, and that is what color the Gatorade shower will be. I think this is one of the most fun props that you can bet on, one of the most fun props in the Caesars prop betting catalog. So here to talk us through how he's going to bet it is John Hasselbauer.
What's going on, everyone? I'm John Hasselbauer, golf writer for thelines.com, but today I'll be talking through my favorite Super Bowl novelty prop on the board, the Gatorade shower color prop. This is a prop that I have hit in the last 2 years. Coincidentally, it has been blue for the Rams and blue for the Bucks, but there are a couple misconceptions before you even consider betting this that you should get out of your head to not cloud your judgment of which Gatorade shower bath color you are going to proceed with. The first is team colors. There's no correlation. You don't want to bet the red Gatorade shower color just because you think the Chiefs are going to win. You don't want to bet the green color just because you think the Eagles are going to win. This is the biggest game of the year. This is not a time where the staff is going to be thinking what would be the most aesthetically pleasing color after we've won the game. They're going to pick the most refreshing flavor, the flavor that the team wants to perform the best when they're drinking it. So absolutely no correlation. If you look down the list of trends, you won't see any correlation between team colors. I'm not factoring that in whatsoever. And when I mention trends, make sure that you are going to thelines.com, going to props, and going to the Gatorade shower page. We have a page every single year. It's updated. It includes the odds of the winner of even the Gatorade shower bath every single year. And it includes other trends of what happened in those games, who's playing, who's coaching. All of these things are the essential need to know before you bet this prop. And my favorite thing about this prop is whichever one wins, you're getting good odds. You're going to, the favorite is usually about plus 250, plus 300. That's what I like about golf betting. And that's what draws me to this prop so much, because you can bet a favorite at a 2 or 3 to 1 return if you want. You can bet a long shot, which I have my eyes on here, at 10 to 1 plus, and it's viable. So I think that's why this is such a favorite. Also a prop where if the Super Bowl hasn't gone your way and you've lost every bet, you have this one last thing at the end that you can look forward to. And as a Super Bowl bettor, when you're approaching the novelty prop market, it's for the entertainment value. So that's why I love this prop so much. Now to get into it, if you look at the consensus odds across the industry, you're going to see that it's either orange or yellow that are the favorites. My best advice, don't ever bet the favorite because no one really knows what they're talking about. You're just going to get shorted on odds. In other cases, you might find that a couple books have one color as the favorite, one doesn't, and there's really no rhyme or reason behind it. So now here's the other thing. Blue has won in each of the last 2 years. It's not the favorite. You can find it anywhere between 3 to 5 to 1. If you want to pick blue, that's fine. I don't think we've ever had the same color win 3 consecutive years, but the odds would show you that blue and orange are the 2 most popularly used Gatorade colors. So you could go that route. That's not the route that I'm going to go. My bet, and I'm going out on a limb here, and this is a controversial pick, I'm going to go with the there will be no Gatorade shower prop. And I'm going to pause there so that you guys can all collect yourselves because that's probably not the answer that you were expecting. But over the last 10 years, that prop has hit twice, which would give you about 5 to 1 odds, all things being equal, which I think you need to treat this market as all things being equal. When did this prop hit? The Patriots' infamous comeback against the Falcons in an overtime win, a last-second play, touchdown in overtime. Everybody rushes the field. There's no time to get the Gatorade out. And the last time was on a defensive stand before that in the Harbaugh Bowl with the Ravens versus the 49ers. Defensive stand. There was no time. We didn't know if they were going to win on that play or not. So the Gatorade was not ready to pour. And it was chaos after the clock hit 0. There was no time to get the Gatorade out. So misconception here, it's not like betting the under where you're hoping for something to not happen. You're actually hoping that the outcome of the game comes down to the very last play so that there's no time to even get the Gatorade out. The best thing about this prop, you could find this well over 10 to 1, making it definitely the best value. You can also find props that are, will the game end with a score in the final play of the game? If that happens, you're all but certain to not have a Gatorade bath because there's just not going to be time. You're not going to have the Gatorade ready. You'd be afraid of jinxing it if you're lining up for a game-winning field goal and he hits it. You're just not going to have the Gatorade ready. So that the props of that to have the last play of the game be a scoring play is about 6 to 1 on Caesars Sportsbook. So this you can find odds nearly double that for essentially the same outcome. If we're assuming that the last play of the game is a scoring play, there's a very small chance that they'll have the Gatorade ready to go. Now, all of a sudden, you're rooting for a competitive game. And if we do have a climactic finish on a game whose spread is 1.5, could go either way, we do anticipate this being a tight matchup. Then all of a sudden, you're in pole position to not see any Gatorade and cash your ticket at what should be well over 10 to 1 odds. That's the best advice I can give you on this prop. Again, I'm not going to force you to say no and abstain from picking a Gatorade prop. If you do choose to go another way, that's your prerogative, but that's how I'll be playing this prop this year.
I've said it before, and I will say it again, but blue, in my opinion, is the only correct choice here. I think there's a reason that it's the favorite, but if you're a team, and Hasselbauer, John talked about this, right, where they're not talking about like color. So if we're the Chiefs, we're not choosing red Gatorade, or if you're truly choosing on flavor and what the team likes, and you choose anything other than Glacier Freeze, the OG Gatorade flavor, then I think you're insane. The red stains your entire mouth. Like, imagine drinking that and then having to do a post-game interview. I know that
you've really thought about this.
Oh, I've thought about it. I have thought about it. Now, I know that John is doing clear or water. To me, that is depressing. If I'm playing the Super Bowl and my sideline has water, I'm walking back into the locker room. So I think orange is an acceptable second choice, I would say. But to me, it's blue and only blue, and I will absolutely be betting that.
Now, to be clear, John isn't betting clear or water. He's betting no liquid whatsoever.
No shower. Yeah.
0 shower.
That's
he thinks
depressing.
Close game, maybe comes down to the final play, not enough time for a Gatorade bath.
Oh, they just have to skip it because so late. That's depressing to me. It's going to be, I hope it's blue.
Now, you are not the only one who has gone down the Gatorade bath rabbit hole. This also has been one of my favorite props to bet every single year. And I've done far more research than I should probably admit on this prop.
Oh.
The last time the Eagles won the Super Bowl, it was yellow. Nick Sirianni got a Gatorade bath after the NFC Championship game, and it was yellow.
Okay.
So if you think the Eagles are going to win, probably
Yellow,
a good chance that it's yellow, or maybe you bet yellow and no Gatorade bath to cover your options there. I don't know what the Chiefs would do if they did. I can just tell you the last time they won the Super Bowl with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, it was orange. So in my opinion,
which is an acceptable second choice.
So here's my, debate team high school mock trial rebuttal here, Miss Russo. What is the likelihood that the team managers have changed the Gatorade order since the last Super Bowl?
Since the last Super Bowl?
I mean, we're all creatures of habit, right? We all hate change. Do you really feel like going into the Gatorade manufacturers and say, hey, we're changing the Gatorade flavor this year?
You think they only have one flavor packet the whole season? They're just giving these guys yellow the entire season?
So now so you're saying there might be 2 Gatorade flavors on the sideline, and we're just at the mercy of which one they happen to grab.
I mean, maybe, yeah. Like, let's give these guys who are playing the biggest game in the world, I mean, I think they should at least have some options. I mean, only Glacier Freeze should be the option, but we understand some people don't like that. But, I mean, again, we have a Gatorade prop betting page over at thelines.com. So if you want to do your research, we've made it very quick for you because we've done all the research. We've done all the history for you.
I'm going yellow and
yellow.
no bath. I'm betting both of those.
It's a sad day to bet those, but to each their own.
Maybe we should just bet each other.
Exactly. Next up, we have our Gridiron Gamble crew to talk us through the Super Bowl MVP market.
Thanks, Matt and Nicole. And hello, world. Welcome to Gridiron Gamble. I'm your host, Rich Ron, and I'm joined by the entire collective, The Disciple, Brett Colson, Donnie, DP Peters, and the resident moose himself, Mo Nuwara, here to talk MVP odds for Super Bowl 57. All these odds courtesy of our friends at Caesars Sportsbook. Make sure to head over to thelines.com and get your best offer or bonus available in your jurisdiction. I was very excited for this section because I knew you guys would come with the value, come with the long shots. I know this is a quarterback award, but you guys love to be contrarian. And then ho-hum, 2 of you give me a quarterback. The one person I am shocked by, the Disciple, Brett Colson, gives me a quarterback of the AFC team. Brett, why do you like Mahomes at this number plus 130 to win MVP?
So here's my take, and I'll dive into this more in the Gridiron Gamble podcast this week, but the Chiefs should be favored in this game. I have a bet on the Chiefs money line. I thought the opener of Chiefs minus 2.5 was far more appropriate than where it is right now, which is Eagles minus 1.5. So I immediately go to the Kansas City roster when looking through this MVP market. And typically I do love diving for value in these markets. It's fun. I've hit a long shot Super Bowl MVP before. It was awesome. The problem with the Chiefs is, and this is very much my feeling on the season-long MVP market coming into the season and why I loved Mahomes. If the Chiefs win, it's going to be because of 15. And that's it. It would take a superhuman stat line from probably a defensive player, like 2 picks, a pick 6, a sack, plus a mediocre performance from Mahomes for voters to give it to anybody other than him. Because the narrative all season was Tyreek Hill's gone. The Chiefs pulled people off the street to run routes and carry the rock. And they still got the 1 seed and led the NFL in numerous offensive metrics. That's how good Mahomes is. And when you factor in the high ankle sprain, like voters are just going to give it to him blindly if the Chiefs win this game. So it's not fun. It's not sexy. But yes, I am backing Patrick Mahomes at plus 130 on Caesars and MVP markets. And I guess what's nice, if you like that number, it's better than the price you're going to get on the Chiefs winning. There is, of course, a non-zero chance that Mahomes doesn't win. It's always in play. But I truly don't think there's any value on the Chiefs in this market other than Mahomes. So that's where I'm going.
Mo, I know you two think the Chiefs should be favored in this game, and anybody that's been following the Lions' power rankings all season probably thinks the same. At what point this season were the Chiefs power ranked ahead of the Eagles? I don't think there was one. So pile on, Mo, with your beloved Canton Patrick Lavon Mahomes II.
Yeah, I don't have that much to add because Brett pretty much said everything I was going to say. I think if you want to bet the Chiefs, it's like Brett said, taking some plus 130 and kind of splitting your bet here makes some sense to me. I mean, I don't know what the split would be, like maybe 80-20 or 70-30. You know, you probably still want most of it on the game line because that's still, like you said, there's a non-zero chance, but you're just getting a better price basically on the Chiefs here. And it's just like Brett said, I don't see that many scenarios where the Chiefs aren't winning with offense. And if the Chiefs are winning with offense, we know that it's going to be because of Mahomes. So I just like can't construct the scenario in my mind where other people are winning on the offense. I mean, you need like splash plays. You need, something huge to happen. I don't know. I was trying to think. MVS is the only guy that popped into my mind, but he's
I got
honestly,
I got a splash, buddy.
He's
that I'm
been
going to give
more of a-
later.
he hasn't been running that many deep routes. He hasn't had that many 70-yard touchdown type of plays. He's been kind of more in the 10 to 20 range most of the time. I mean, you look at his ADOT this year, it's like 4 yards lower than his last 3 years with the Packers. So it's just hard to see a scenario where it's somebody other than Mahomes.
MVS has bells ringing for DP because DP is blasting like a sawed-off shotgun, and Mr. Valdez-Scantling is amongst that number. DP, spray and pray. Who do you got?
I mean, did you guys really think I was going to come in here and just pick some plus 130 favorite? No shot. I got Devontae Smith, plus 2,500. I got MVS, as you guys were just talking about, plus 8,000. And then a little taste on Juju Smith-Schuster, also at plus 8,000. Listen, I prefer him to go boom or bust with the Super Bowl MVP bets. It's not that I disagree with the stuff that you guys are saying in regards to Mahomes. It's the Super Bowl. I think all value is beaten out of all these lines. So if I'm going to hit, let's hit something that's worth it, in my opinion. I think all three of these guys have the potential to have a game that, is similar to what we saw from Cooper Kupp when he won the MVP, from Julian Edelman when he won the MVP. I mean, their numbers weren't too crazy. I mean, Cooper Kupp was 8 for 92, 2 touchdowns. Julian Edelman didn't even have a touchdown. It was 10 for 141. Why can't one of these guys go off? Specific to Devontae Smith, he's my favorite of these three because of the way that the Chiefs play defense in the secondary, allowing him to go off probably for some deep balls. And then on the other side, I mean, I kind of think Mahomes is going to throw an interception, and that's one of the props that I'm going to be on. We'll talk about that on the Gridiron Gamble podcast later.
You guys don't think that Travis Kelce is live for this at plus 1,000? I know there isn't an MVP award for the divisional round, but if there was, he would have won it. I mean, this dude had
no shot.
What are you talking about? He had 14 catches in that game.
Doesn't matter.
Come on. This guy has a 33% target share in the playoffs. I agree. I'm not in love with plus 1,000, which is why the ultimate punt. Come on, guys. It's staring right in front of you. And you guys gave me some props on this player for the podcast that everybody can listen to for our full selection of picks. Guys, it's Kadarius Toney. 150-1 to win MVP. The Chiefs want to get this guy the ball. He played 20 snaps against the Jags and had 7 targets and 1 carry. He only played 4 snaps against the Bengals, had 2 targets in those 4 snaps. Andy Reid wants to get the ball into Kadarius Toney's hands. And if this guy busts one big play that Mo is talking about, then there could be a sweat here. And in the red zone as well, where they've struggled, where they can't run the ball and they have to create a horizontal running attack. What if he gets one of those pop passes? I was playing, this is what I did last year when I touted OBJ. I was playing with same game parlays and multiple touchdowns for Kadarius Toney, and I couldn't get near the plus 150 that is available at Caesars Sportsbook. Him to score 2 touchdowns is plus 3,400.
So this one's kind of interesting because you also get special teams. As well, where Mahomes isn't on the field. Exactly. So I can buy in. I can't bet it because I'm in New York, but this one is actually kind of interesting to me.
There you go. And then before we get out of here, Mo, you do have one hedge against your beloved Kansas City Chiefs. If you were to pick an MVP winner from the Eagles, who is it?
I put A.J. Brown, but I looked really hard at Devontae Smith too. A.J. Brown's plus 1,500, Devontae Smith plus 2,500. It's hard for me to pick one, but I really do think the receivers are better value than Jalen Hurts. Just the way I've seen Jalen Hurts throwing the ball, I think he's really having a hard time getting the ball downfield. So if there's like a huge play for the Eagles, I think it'll be a catch and run where there's some tackles broken. Obviously, A.J. Brown excels at breaking tackles. Devontae Smith maybe needs to run away from everybody, but he can probably do that. I don't hate a bet on either one of those guys. I think it's much more likely for the Eagles to have some kind of offensive win where somebody besides the quarterback excels. I know that shouldn't be a hot take, but the market says it is.
And those are our clicks for MVP in Super Bowl 57. All you viewers out there, enjoy the game. Best of luck in your betting ventures. Stephen, Nicole, sending it back to you in Arizona.
All right, Stephen, do we really think a non-quarterback could potentially win MVP this year?
Not for the Chiefs. I think if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, it's going to be really hard for anybody other than Patrick Mahomes to win MVP. So in my mind, if you want to bet on the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, I would just bet Patrick Mahomes at plus 130 at Caesars to win Super Bowl MVP. Maybe somebody gets an interception and also gets a second one and returns it for a touchdown, but the chances of that are so small in a game with a total in the 50s. I think the Eagles is where you take some shots at non-quarterbacks. We've talked about the Jalen Hurts injury ad nauseum at this point. There's been a lot of talk around gambling Twitter about Hassan Reddick. Again, if you like Hassan Reddick to possibly be a Super Bowl MVP long shot, why are you not taking Josh Sweat at 3-4 times the odds on the opposite side, who's just as likely to wreck the game with the pass rush? But my favorite is Miles Sanders, and I'm surprised none of the Gridiron Gamble guys mentioned him, because I think of all the non-quarterbacks in this game, Miles Sanders has the best chance to win Super Bowl MVP, which is crazy to say because a running back has not won Super Bowl MVP since Terrell Davis in 1998 for the Denver Broncos. It wasn't even this century. But I think the Eagles are a throwback offense. We've talked about how dominant they have been running the ball, and this offensive line just throwing Pro Bowl caliber players on the ground in the NFC Championship game for the 49ers defensive front. And we know that when it's a close game, it's Miles Sanders is the one on the field, not Kenny Gainwell, not Boston Scott. So if I'm taking a shot on a long shot for Super Bowl MVP, it's Miles Sanders.
Thanks for joining us, and a huge thanks to Caesars Sportsbook and Omaha for hosting us here at Radio Row in Phoenix for the Super Bowl. Now, Stephen, you know I'm betting on blue Gatorade all the way. You are not joining me on that one. Any last words, any favorite bets before we sign off?
I think I've given everybody enough bets, but I will give you a fun fact, something that I don't think many NFL fans know about the Vince Lombardi Trophy. And from my understanding, this is a pretty well-kept secret among teams in the NFL, that when a team wins the Super Bowl, the team actually gets 2 Vince Lombardi trophies. The one that they got awarded on the podium, and then the one that they use for public team events when the fans come around, want to get pictures taken with it.
The one that can get messed up.
They bring the replica one out that can get the fingerprints on it, etc. And the only way you can tell the difference between the two is that the one that's awarded on the podium, the NFL insignia, the shield, is a raised logo. The replica is a flat logo. So there you go. There's your
Super Bowl fun fact that you can say at your Super Bowl party for everyone. Before we sign off, make sure to head over to thelines.com/Caesars Sportsbook to sign up for the Caesars Sports Betting app, and make sure that you get your new user sign-up offer. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you
more prop
next time.
There
I
we
love
go.
it. Bye, guys.